my son David, right over here in Portland. John, I come home from the penitentiary, death row, talking to him and counseling the guys that were condemned to death. And pulled up, and John was throwing dirt clods from the neighbor's flower garden she had just turned over. And he was pushing on this little scooter that had wheels about this big and just going back and forth, and John was throwing dirt clods at the wheel. Well, there was dirt clods all over the road, and I come out and I see this, and I said, John, stop that and get out of Lori's flower bed. Get out of that flower bed. She dug that up. You're going to have to go in and dig it over again now before she plants. And he says, oh, Dad, it's not hurting anything. I said, I know it's not, but it's going to hurt you if you don't get all that dirt picked up out of the road now. You don't start sweeping the dirt out. And quit throwing at David. And so I went in the house thinking he'd obey. You know, children don't always obey right away. And he just had to throw one word. Technically, the boy should have been a baseball pitcher. He's got an arm that I think he could throw 100 miles an hour. You know what I mean? Wow. But he had to throw that last one. He didn't pay attention what he picked up, but he picked up a rock. And he let go of it, and it went too high, and it was heading for David's back of his head. And he hollered, David, duck! Instead of ducking, David turned, and it sheared the eye right off and cut his nose. There he is, riding out in the street there at 9666 North Kellogg, Portland. Mark comes running in. David's hurt. He's laying in the street just wallowing in pain. I thought a car hit him. Go, grab him, start praying. Are you all right? Are you all right? He says, I'm alright. And I pulled his hand away, and there's no eye left. Just gray matter, sunken pieces of eye on his cheek. No pupil, no eyes. He had the most beautiful blue eyes. David. He says, John, you better pray, young man. You better pray. You better pray. You know the result of your disobedience, son. You will have to carry this. I grew up with a boy who threw a nail and hit his brother in the eye. And he had to live with that. And that's what I was thinking. The condemnation John would fight over doing that to his brother. He says, you better pray, son. I picked him up. He was 10 years old, carried him into the house, sitting on the couch, and he was just riding on the couch, praying. My wife joined me. We were praying. We prayed with such earnestness that we didn't even take time to turn the lights on. It got dark. The children were still praying, playing outside. My cousin came in who was a Mormon, and she always would come and sit in the recliner because she said, there's peace in your house and there's nothing but striving and turmoil in mine. And could I just come and find peace, you know? Could I just come until I get enough peace to go back home to my kids? She had 4 teenagers in the house, and they were driving her crazy, and the Mormon church didn't help that, you know? I used to kind of tease her and say, wait a minute, I thought the Mormon church is so wonderful. We're families. What's the problem? You know, I feel badly that I did that now. I just had to, because she converted from the Pentecostal church to the Mormon church. So I was getting my 2 cents worth. But she sits there and comes in, and what's going on? She takes one look at David in his eye, and I have never heard "Oh God" in so many different expressions as I heard from her for that 30, 40 minutes. Oh God! 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 She went on for 45 minutes. That was all she could pray. Oh God! I just wanted to say, dear Phyllis, would you just quiet? But I didn't. Well, after quite some time, I don't know if it's 45 minutes, but it seemed like forever. Up came the recliner, and out the door she went. Said, I can't take any more. Oh God, I can't take any more. Out the door she went. We kept praying and praying with such seriousness and crying out to the Lord. David all of a sudden began to quiet down. He sat up and he put his hand over the injured eye, And he looked across the room at the wood stove and he says, Mom, now the lights weren't on. The sun had gone down. Mom, is the yellow teapot on the wood stove? Yes, it is. I can see it with the bad eye. Turned the lights on, went over to him, and if you press 4 fingers together as tight as you can, you make a little bitty square. I looked into that sunken gray matter, and all was there was a little black square, no bigger than pushing 4 fingers together, as tightly as you can. He had no pain. He could see it. So he said, I'm tired. Can I go to bed? I said, you sure can. Well, in Oregon, they passed a law. If you don't register with a doctor, any injury, something like that, or serious sickness within 24 hours, the family services come and take the children away. So the next morning, I knew we had to get to the doctor for him. He hadn't got up yet, and I was sitting at the breakfast table. And I said, honey, you know, we gotta take him to the doctor today. We didn't have any health insurance. I pulled out of my employment. We were living by faith. Hallelujah. Don't you love living by faith? We didn't have health insurance. We called it blessed assurance. Jesus is mine. Hallelujah. Oh, look at that. He's even got Legos. Wow. That's what our kids grew up on, and they make some of the most awesome things, and now my grandkids play with Legos.
Get a bank loan.
Oh, they'd rather do that than sitting there in these little video games, you know. They can make some of the most beautiful creations. Thank you. That's good. You're right. You're good, aren't you? Yeah, let's see that.
YouTube.
Way to go. That's 2 thumbs up.
No, I'm making steroids.
Yeah, good for you. Just keep creating. Keep creating. One of these days you'll create something by the Spirit of God and it'll make you live.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Or you'll believe God for creative miracles. Amen. So, we got to finish that, don't I? So, I'll leave that. Sorry, I forgot to turn it off. So I'll tell them no, turn it off. Maybe I think they're I'm expecting a call from Korea, that's why. Otherwise I'd leave it on. So here comes David down the breakfast table. The sun is shining in the window. And he turns to me. He's got a perfect eye, half of it. The lower half is solid blood red, like a big blood clot. The upper half is perfect iris, pupil, everything. You can see perfectly. Yes, I left a message. These things talk to you. So, let me shut you down. Thank you. Okay. So I looked at his face and I said, you've got a perfect eye on the top. Blood clot on the bottom. So we took him to the doctor. The wife took him to the doctor. I stayed home with the kids and the rest of them. And the doctor took one look in his little eye thing, you know, and reached over to the phone, dialed the dealer's eye clinic in Portland, right there now, right near Good Samaritan Hospital. Said, I've got a young man here that has very serious injuries to his eye, and it's way above me. Said, I send him over here. I send him right away. So my wife calls and says, I'm on my way to Deaver's clinic. Told me where it was. I met her there. And they take him in, and they said, now, they put him on this big machine. They said, now, if you will sit totally still, we won't freeze your eye. What kid? isn't going to sit totally still. Being threatened with his eye to get frozen, you know. And so she begins moving this optical thing right up to his eye, and she begins squealing like, and she comes around to me and she says, "What time did you say this happened? How many days ago?" I said, "No, ma'am. Last night, no later than 6 in the evening. I got home about 5:30 from Salem, the penitentiary. It could have been no later than 6 o'clock. I was just a few minutes in the house. The sun was still shining over the hill there, over Germantown Hill." She said, "You don't understand. An injury like this does not blood clot like this prior to 5 days. Well, right there goes my family. She's got to report to the family services that I did not report for 5 days. I said, "Ma'am, I have at least 4 or 5 neighbors that saw this happen. I have friends that saw it happen. I have a cousin that was there shortly after it happened. I could probably produce 7 or 8 witnesses that this happened last night, no later than 6 o'clock. She says, "You don't understand." Out she goes, and I thought, "Oh, Lord, here goes my children." Because when they first put that law into motion in Oregon, they were going and taking children away from parents. Little babies right out of people's arms. It was going on. It was vicious. You talk about taking the law into your own hands and going too far with it. And that fear just come over me. Next thing I know, she comes back in with 4 more doctors. And they're looking into this machine, and they're chattering away technical language. And so I said, "Excuse me, could you tell me what's going on?" And the doctor pulls away from the optical thing and says, "We're seeing a new eyeball created right before our eyes. The retina is forming. It's reattaching. This is impossible." And they're fighting to look into this machine. 5 eye specialists saw a brand new eyeball created right before their eyes. I have the documentation of it. Years later in Omaha, Nebraska, I gave the testimony, and an eye specialist was in the meeting. I didn't know who he was. And Graves was his name, Dr. Graves, come up, handed me his card. He says, "I want to offer you eye exams and glasses for you and your family. But I'd like to start with David. I want to see his eye." Well, we took him, and I'm with him there in the room, and he puts this machine up to his eye, and he pulls away, and he gets a book, and he opens it up, and he says, "You see all these eyeballs there?" I says, "Yeah." He says, "Now, what's the difference between the ones on the left and the ones on the right?" I said, "Well, I can read. It says these have been damaged, so they're deformed. But these on the right are a different color of iris pupil and all that, and different, every eye is different." And he said, "Exactly." And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Come look into the machine." I come and look in. He says, "Now look back on the book. Which eyeball do you see here?" I picked one of the perfect ones over here. And he says, "Exactly." And I says, "Yeah, exactly. That's what I see." He says, "You don't understand." I said, "What don't I understand?" Well, he says, "Forget it. He's got perfect vision in that eye, but he's got a slight astigmatism in his left eye, so he's going to need glasses, so we'll fix him up with glasses." Well, there was no more conversation about it. Well, then, our neighbor in Woodbine, Iowa, where we live, my wife was testifying over the clothesline. You know how ladies hang up clothes? She was testifying to the neighbor who was hanging up clothes about this miracle of David's eye. And this lady says, "I'm an agnostic. I don't believe in that stuff. You got to give me some proof. I need evidence." So I come home and my wife says, "We got to get evidence. You think Deeper's Eye Clinic would have the documentation yet?" I says, "I don't think they'll ever forget it." So I call them up, and they said, "Oh, you mean David Gruber?" "Oh yes, we've got 5 pages of reports on him. We still talk about him here. This was 4.5, 5 years later. And I said, would you do us a favor? We have a person here that doesn't believe that God created a new eye. Would you send us a copy of that? Absolutely. We'll overnight it to him. Now, they didn't charge a thing. I took him in 5 days in a row. You know what it would cost 5 days in a row for them to put these machines on him, looking over those eyes? And 5 days in a row. When we went to the business office the end of the 5th day, when they just checked his eye, he had 20/40 vision. That's better than 20/20. Perfect vision, still has perfect vision. That glass is totally clear in that eye. The other one's for the stigmatism. I should have asked perfect vision in both eyes. Now when something happens, if one injury takes place, I ask for perfect health in the other. I mean, when you got 2 of them, you need perfect health in both. Pray for one ear, pray for the other. One eye, pray for the other. One hand, pray for the other. Because this one's been doing all the work, but this one's injured. See what I mean? 1 foot, leg, whatever. And so we get the 5 pages, but we can't read them. It's technical language. So I call up Dr. Graves. Dr. Graves, I don't know if you got the time or not, but we've got a neighbor here that doesn't believe David's testimony of his new eye. Would you mind looking over the documents that we have from Beaver's Eye Clinic in Portland, Oregon? Would you mind looking it over and put it in layman's language so we can prove it to our neighbor? He said, no problem, bring it in. So we take the 5 pages in. My wife and I are sitting across from him. He's sitting there and he's reading the first page. Then he reads the second page. Then he goes back to the first page. Then he goes back and he reads the third page. Then he goes back to the first page. And all of a sudden, tears just shoot out. And he starts weeping. And he says, Mr. and Mrs. Gruber, I don't know how to say this. I owe you an apology. I didn't believe the testimony. You see, Mr. Gruber, I showed you eyes that had been damaged. A muscle, if you cut a muscle, it deforms. To have that severe of injury, his eyeball would have been deformed. It's a perfect eye, so I didn't believe your testimony. But I've been going back to page 1 of the first day you came in with him, and I'm trying to decipher what I'm seeing in page 2, like day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5. He has a brand new eye created in front of these 5 doctors. All 5 of them have signed this. This is a miracle. I've never seen such a thing. How do I thank you for bringing this in? I said, you're writing in layman's terms. We've got a neighbor that might go to hell without it. So, isn't God awesome? He is so awesome. Well, the glory of God come down in that big auditorium up there in Tsu, TSU. Tsu, they pronounce it Tsu, right? Tsu, 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 Japan. And I prayed over those 75 people, and I was standing up there rejoicing in the Lord, and one of the men came up to me and said, listen, Henry, it's almost 1 o'clock in the morning. We started at 7. It's almost 1 o'clock in the morning. The gates to the big parking lot will be closed at 2, and people will not be able to get their car out until tomorrow after 10 o'clock. So we've got to get the people out of here. We've got less than an hour to get them out of here and down out of the gates in your cars. There's no mercy. I said, okay, how are we going to do it? They said, well, we've got your Bible from the podium in your shoes. We'll meet you at the door. Put your shoes on at the door. And if you go out, they'll go out. You know, sheep follow. So I go to the door, and here they come. They're coming out. Well, we come out, up at the top of this big stairs, you know, this big steps that flange out into the parking lot. And we head out, and all the people are following, and I get almost down, and the car that's going to take me to the hotel pulls up, and I turn around to wave to the people that are coming out of our concert, and I see the people coming out of their heavy rock and roll concert. The people coming out of our concert, their eyes, their face are shining like light bulbs. And the people coming out of the heavy metal rock and roll concert see it. They can see their faces shining. And they're coming out and they're just looking. And they're pointing at our people. And so I said to Dr. Nakagawa, run back up through our people and tell them, start witnessing. Start witnessing. This is the harvest. Don't lose this harvest.
Amen.
Yeah, I don't know Japanese, not enough to witness to people yet. And so I can't do it. I can't witness. They put me in the car and said, we got to get you out of here. And up we go. And away we go. And all these lights are mingling with these darknesses. Just full, I'd love to have had it on video. It would have been one of the most awesome videos. To see what the glory of God did. I understand that hundreds of young people came to Jesus. That even the guy that was going to close the gates came up there to see these glowing faces and didn't push to lock the gate. He got saved. Isn't God awesome? I tell you, it just, I love to see God do things like that. So let's believe that God is going to do that in this region. Just get into something they don't finish. Okay? Graham Truscott, I remember his name. Graham Truscott was one of the speakers. Derek Prince was another one. And Bob Mumford. Those three were speakers back there in 1973. And Graham Truscott got up and he told of a vision that he had. He said, I just had a vision sitting here while Derek Prince was speaking. And he said, the Lord told me to tell it. I believe it directly affects the days ahead. He said, in this vision, I saw this black cloud raise up toward New York City, and that direction. And this massive black cloud came from there and began to come and envelop the land of the United States. But he said, then I saw a white cloud raise up from the general area of Portland and Oregon, Washington. I saw this white cloud come up, glorious white cloud, and it began to move east. And the white cloud met the black cloud and drove the black cloud out of the country. God said He's going to bring His glory over this nation. He is going to visit this nation with a visitation of His glory. I haven't seen that happen yet since 1973. So I know we are still slated for it. We're still scheduled for it.
Amen.
I'm going to keep claiming it. Amen?
Amen.
Well, it really brought it fresh back to me when just before I left to come here from Iowa, I had just come back from Korea, spent a week and a half at home, and then came up here, drove up here. I got a call from an intercessor that had been one of my main intercessors for 35 years. And they are missionaries in Africa, missionaries in Brazil, missionaries in Israel, and across America and Canada. They set up a mission station in the Congo when that terrible coup took place. And their compound was right in the middle, and people were being brought out on the wall of their compound, standing to the wall, and they were shooting them every night. The guy that rules over the Congo now. But they kept praying and they were safe. They could go out shopping. And when these rebels that took over the country, aimed an AK-47 at them. They just pointed at it and said, in the name of Jesus, put your finger off that trigger. If you don't want to get hurt, you don't touch God's anointed. And fear would come over them, they'd take off running. So that's God's authority. You see what I mean? And so these people are godly people. Well, back in February or January, just before I left for Japan of 2010. 2010, now let's see. When was the tsunami in Sendai? Was that 2010, 2011?
Yeah.
2000, 2 years ago, 2011.
Beginning of 2011.
2011. All right, January 2011, this sister called me. She spends many hours in prayer every day. And she goes every year, several times to Israel, and goes to King David's gate. She called me just a couple days before I left for Japan, and she said, Henry, I just came back from Jerusalem. The Lord told me to call you and tell you this. I go up to King David's gate, and for years now, when I go up there, I always see the Lord. He always appears as a king, the most glorious, attired king. She said, I've looked at kings, I've researched kings and how they're dressed and all, and I have never found one yet that can even begin to put a candle to the sun of how glorious he's attired as the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And she said, he always meets me in King David's gate. And he tells me things, and I know he's told her things, and I know things she's told me, and they've come to pass. And so there's a good track record there of her testimony. But she said, this time, I just came back. She said, just the end of December from Jerusalem. And this time I went up to King David's gate. And when I went up to the gate, the Lord appeared. Only this time, he did not appear as king. He appeared as the most terrible and powerful warrior I have ever seen in my life. And she said, the instant he appeared in front of me, I felt like my life was like you just take a rag and drop it. I just fell. I had no power to stay on my feet. I just fell. I felt like my life went out of me. And she said, I thought I was dead, but I didn't leave there. When I felt a hand take hold of me, and I heard a voice say, daughter, arise. I want to show you. And she rose to her feet, and strength came into her. And she said, as strength came into me like I've never felt in all my life, I looked upon him who was so terrible and so powerful. And he said to me, daughter, in the past, I have always appeared to you as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. But I have now appeared to you as the Lion of the tribe of Judah. In the past, I have winked at the ignorance and the foolishness of man that has touched my people Israel. But I will wink at it no more. I will retaliate quickly. And he disappeared. That was January, she told me. I went over to Japan. I was there February until March. I flew out on March the 11th. I flew out 4 hours before the Sendai earthquake. The airport I flew out of, 100-foot wave hit that airport. 4 hours after I flew out. I was in the air flying to Los Angeles when that 100-foot wave hit that airport at 500 miles an hour. What do you think that does? 100-foot wall of water, 500 miles. You said it didn't. Have you ever tried to calculate how little bit of time it took it to go all the way from Japan to hit the Oregon, Washington, California coast? Just a matter of a few hours. Straight across. If you calculate that, you'll find it went 500 miles an hour. The devastation took place was unbelievable. I've been through there, I've wept, I've cried about it, crying out, why, Lord, all the children in the schools, whole villages are gone, all their records are washed into the ocean. They still do not know how many died in that, because all the public records in the buildings were just destroyed, just swished clean. All the public records washed into the sea. They don't know how many are missing. They're still making pleas to families. If you haven't heard from family members, let us know. If you know for a fact that family members lived along this 250-mile coastal area, 250 miles of coast were wiped out. Every village, every town, every city. Factories, Buddhist temples, churches. Just wiped out. I have pictures of 350-foot-long ocean-going steel-hulled ships, a half a mile up the side of the mountain, after they had gone through a city. That's the kind of power that was there. The Daiichi power plant got holes knocked in the side of it, and that's where the meltdown took place of that area there of Daiichi power plant. Daiichi in Japanese means number one, first. So that was the devastation. And when I came home and heard about this in Los Angeles, I just wept so hard. And I won't go into all of what I did and crying out. But the 8th day that I was on my face in my prayer room crying out to the Lord, told my wife I didn't want to answer any phone calls, I don't want to eat anything. I've got to have answers. The 8th day, the Lord spoke to me. Now, I had received a word from a lady in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. It was put on my cell phone 6 hours before the Sendai earthquake hit. 6 hours before. Henry, the Lord told me to call you. I know you're in Japan or on your way back. All I got is your message. Your phone obviously isn't on. But the Lord told me to tell you this. I sent Henry to Japan to redeem the land and the people. Lines have been drawn. Choices have been made. And the sea will convulse in response. I am preparing mansions in perfect symmetrical order for those that I will be bringing home soon. Perfect symmetrical order. If you've ever been to Japan, you have never been in a country where the green grocer, one carrot sits this way, the other carrot sits that way. They literally are in perfect order. Their fruits and everything are the same size, or they go into the discount bag. They're a piece of art. The way they lay out their villages, their fields, and the rice paddies, everything is in symmetrical order. Everything is beautifully laid out. She was right on, and she had never been to Japan. I love Japan. I love the people of Japan. And I'm preparing them in perfect symmetrical order for those that I will be bringing home soon. And I said, Lord, but what about the children? What did they do to deserve this? And the Lord spoke to me so powerfully, and He said, Henry, those children are with me. You're not listening to Hope's message. The mansions I prepared for those children, they are with me. You should see them now. And I said, Lord, what am I going to tell the people of Japan? He said, tell them, I had to have a harvest in Japan. I sent missionaries, young people singing, and evangelists along that 250 miles for years, pleading with them, and they would not listen. They continued their festivals, they continued all their doings, and they wouldn't accept anything but Buddha. And they took their children to bow to the stone gods, and they took their children to the festivals. And Henry, those children will never be drunk on sake, and they will never bow to a Buddha or a stone god.
Hallelujah.
They are mine. I gave them life. I can take away. They're with me. I couldn't get my face close enough to the floor, repenting for questioning the wisdom of God. All I could think was those beautiful little Japanese children in their little uniforms that looked like U.S. Navy uniforms. They even wear the Navy hat, the navy blue with the stripes and stars and on it. They're so darling. The people of Japan love Americans. You've heard me tell this. You've heard me tell how I was one of the first foreign flights after the Twin Towers come down. I was on 5 islands of Japan. Every island, every restaurant was playing the music, God Bless America. Every gas station was flying American flags, either only the American flag on top and the Japanese flag on the bottom. Folks, that isn't what you do in foreign countries. You fly your nation on top, and then you can fly another nation on the bottom. And I asked a man of 25 gas pumps in Tokyo at the end of those 7 weeks, being on 5 islands, seeing this. I went into the inner part of that office of that big gas station, and I asked him, I have just one question. I've been on 5 islands for 7 weeks, and every gas station is flying either only American flags or the American flag on top, the Japanese flag on the bottom. Can you explain why? He stood up at his desk, tears come to his eyes. He reached out his hand over that desk to me. He took my hand and gripped it tightly, and he said, because Americans are our brothers. And when they suffer, we're suffering with them. This is our way of showing that we're concerned. I brought that message back to America. I said, why isn't that on the NBC, CBS, national news? Why isn't that the news story of the week? Why don't they go over to Tokyo, to General MacArthur's headquarters of the occupation, where they bring children from 3rd grade all the way through high school, and they march them through the memorial, the museum of the occupation, and they highly lift up and exalt General MacArthur and the Americans for the kindness of the Americans to the Japanese people in the time of the occupation. Think about it. We walk by schools and little children come running, hanging on to the chain link fence. Ohio American! Hello American! We love you! First time I took one of my sons, big husky football player kid, right out of school. He starts crying, looking at all these hundreds of kids this age and older, running and hanging onto the fence. Oh, hello Americans, we love you. He looked at me and he says, Dad, do they always do that? I said, they always do it. You know, I've told this and I've seen elderly men who had spent years in the death march and all this in prison camps in the Second World War with the brutality and the torture of the Japanese. And I've seen them just break and just start weeping because all of a sudden they realize we didn't suffer for nothing. We saved Japan and Japan loves us. We rebuilt Japan and they love us. And I'm hoping Iraq will do the same thing. We've occupied Germany now for many years, but they don't seem to love us. It's too bad. I've walked Germany and suffered many of their abuses. They still insist they've never been conquered. I beg your pardon. They're still so full of pride, so you know it will raise up again. We did Desert Storm. I was in Japan, and I watched the Diet. That's like the Senate in the United States, and there was a great debate going on in the Diet because Japan wanted to send troops for Desert Storm to help take over Saddam Hussein in Iraq. But under the treaty that was signed, General MacArthur on the USS Missouri, that treaty stated that Japan would never again use any of its troops to fight in a foreign land. They would only have an army under the agreement to defend themselves in the event that they were attacked on their own soil. So that dispute went on back and forth, saying that America would understand. America would appreciate us sending our soldiers over to help out. And there were those that said, but this is a treaty, supersedes all the bylaws of a nation. You cannot violate a treaty. You realize when we make treaties with nations, that treaty is more powerful than our Constitution. That's why we have right now UN troops all over America. Because of treaties we've signed. We're being homogenized now with foreign military power. I don't know if you realize that. We've got over 300,000 foreign troops in America right now. We have massive military bases that are all Russian, all German, all Italian. We have forces, special forces from Russia, special fighting men in big camps in America. Outside of 60 miles outside of Las Vegas, Pahrump, Nevada, black attack helicopters, the state-of-the-art fighting helicopters, squadrons of them there, all manned by Russians. We better pray. We better pray. The Republic, for what it stands, is quickly diminishing. You never hear anything about America being a republic anymore. America is a democracy. No, it was not founded as a democracy. It was never determined that it should be a democracy. A democracy operates under admiralty law, military law. Admiralty law, according to our Constitution, says you cannot have admiralty law on the citizen of the United States of America above the 60 feet above the highest tide. We have Washington, D.C. It is operating under admiralty law. It has the gold fringe of the American flag. Our courts are all operating under the gold fringe. They are all operating under the Uniform Commercial Code, which is admiralty law. I don't know if you know that. It's a fact. It's a fact. I have contacts in the Pentagon. I've been in the White House 2 times. I was in the Bush administration. I talked about these things. They all understand it. You and I don't. But it shows how America, the beautiful, is quickly compromising and losing its republic. We've got to get back to Jesus, our only hope. It's there, it says it in both books. That's our only hope. Don't ever let go of that. Well, wow. May I read something to you? The Bible. How about it? Sorry, I have to have reading glasses for this close. I want to read to you out of Luke chapter 1. And this is what I want to close with tonight, because I want you to understand this, where we are. I just preached this over in South Korea and shared it with leaders in South Korea. The importance of this first chapter of Luke, starting with verse 67. He's quoting his father Zacharias, the father of John the Baptist, was filled with the Holy Ghost, and he prophesied, saying, this is the only place in the Bible that the prophecy of Zechariah, the father of John the Baptist, shows up. But listen to this prophecy. It is so awesome. Blessed be the Lord God, verse 68, of Israel, for he hath visited and redeemed his people, and hath raised up an horn of salvation for us in the house of his servant David, as he spake by the mouth of his holy prophets, which have been since the world began. Did you know there were prophets since the world began? Sure were, weren't there? What did they prophesy? It just goes right on into it for convenience. Verse 71. They prophesied that we should be saved from our enemies and from the hand of all that hate us. How much is all? All. That's what they prophesied since the world began. Why? Why are we to be saved from our enemies in the hand of all that hate us? Verse 72 is why? To perform the mercy promised to our fathers, and to remember his holy covenant, the oath which he sware to our father Abraham. Verse 74, that he would grant unto us that we, being delivered out of the hand of our enemies, might serve him without fear. I just told you we have over 300,000 special forces of foreign troops in America. If martial law is declared, they will be the law keepers, not our own soldiers. They learned that in Beijing when the young students, university students in Beijing back when I was still living in Portland, demonstrated in Beijing demanding liberty and freedom. And chairman called for the military to go in and crush them. They couldn't get anybody. No military would go crush their own sons and daughters. So they called them from a province way far away in China. There's 110 provinces in China. 110 provinces. You realize there has been no nation with 110 provinces since the days of Esther? China has 110 provinces. And they called them from the farthest province away who knew none of these children and students. And they came in with their tanks and rolled over them and crushed them. Thousands of them. The bodies were stacked up in Tiananmen Square there for days till they could get them all away. They squelched the revolution. Well, that we, being delivered out of the hand of our enemies, might serve him without fear. If we will claim these words, if we will trust in the Word of God, if we will trust in Psalms 91 and dwell in the secret place of the Most High, then we will abide under the shadow of the Almighty. Then 1,000 can fall at our right and 10,000 at our left, and it will not come near us. That's a covenant of God. If we will not fret because of evildoers, according to Psalms 37, verse 1, then we will see the evildoers as ashes under our feet. I do a teaching called Purging America. God is going to purge this nation. There are cities across America that are marked for utter destruction. Why? Why are they marked for utter destruction? Because God is going to draw all of these that are pro-abortion, all of these that are pro-gay rights, all of these that are pro-immorality and want to live a life the way they want it and are spitting in the face of God. He is going to draw them to these cities, and you're going to see the population of these cities that are marked for destruction literally increase more and more in wickedness, violence, and immorality. You're going to see more and more nude dancing. You're going to see more and more nude parades down the street in these cities. If we don't have a visitation in Portland, Portland will be no more. You know and I know what they're doing there. Gay liberation and all these that have a right to manifest as they please, riding in the nude, on bicycles, 100 strong, 250 strong, down through the streets into the Pioneer Square and back out into the communities where children are playing in the front yard. Here they are riding, parading themselves with nothing on in front of the children, defiling our children. If we don't see this turn, Portland will be no more. So that's why it says this, that we might serve him. And grant unto us that we, being delivered out of the hand of our enemies, verse 74, might serve him without fear, in holiness and righteousness before him all the days of our life. Then verse 76, and thou, child, shalt be called the prophet of the highest, for thou shalt go before the face of the Lord to prepare his ways. Notice he says, child. Jesus said, except you be as little children, you can't enter the kingdom of heaven. But if you're as a child before the Lord, you go before him to prepare his ways. Verse 77 tells you what you're going to do. To give knowledge, here's preparing the way of the Lord. To give knowledge of salvation unto the people by the remission of their sins. I've taught that now for 53 years across America. Remitting sins. Don't retain sins. Remitting sins. I think there's some CDs back there that says remitting sins, and don't take it personally. Don't take it personally is a very important teaching. In the book, the Prayer Walking book, is a whole chapter on don't take it personally. Take it to the Father. Amen. It's a discipline in your life. But don't fret because of evildoers, or you will be marked to be destroyed along with them. I think it's in Ezekiel chapter 9 that he said, for them to go forth through the city, the men with the destroying weapons in their hands, and they were told to go forth and to utterly slay all, men, women, and children, young and old. But to put a mark, the priest, the man with a linen ephod upon his body, he went, and he was first told to go put a mark upon the foreheads of those that sigh and cry for the abominations that are committed. Are you affected by immorality enough that you can sigh and cry, that you can cry out to the Lord concerning the abominations? Then if you are, according to this scripture, then you are registered by the Lord to be spared, to be preserved. Those, even though they may look like good Christians, that they will not be affected by the immorality and the corruption around them. They will not be marked for protection. Will they go to hell? I don't think so. But they definitely will be taken out prematurely. It's coming. It's coming. So that's what it says here, to give knowledge in verse 77 of Luke 1. To give knowledge of salvation unto his people by the remission of their sins. You see how powerful remitting sins is? John 20, verse 23. The first words of our Lord when he came back from the dead and appeared in the room where his disciples were locked in for fear of their life, afraid they'd be killed next. What was his message to them? Peace be unto you was his first word, which they needed desperately. And then he breathed on them and said, receive the Holy Ghost, which they needed desperately. And then he said, verse 23, whosoever sins you remit, they are remitted unto them. Whosoever sins you retain, they are retained. How do you know if you're remitting or retaining? You see someone sin. I sit today at an intersection watching people make a left turn in front of me. I prayed for every person, every face that went by me as they made that left turn in front of me. Whatever the Holy Spirit told me to pray, I prayed for them. You see, that you can remit, and they don't even know it. Remit means to release, relax, absolve, discontinue, leave off, mitigate, alleviate, soften, relent, consign, and deliver. 11 meanings of the synonym of the word remit if you get a good dictionary. If you don't remit payment for these lights, you're going to be sitting in the dark. Because it was services rendered, wasn't it? And if you don't pay now, they won't turn them back on until you pay ahead then. So you see, that's remitting. But remitting with sin is to ask God to forgive when they're not even repentant. Then he pours his goodness upon the sinner. Romans 2 verse 4. And it's his goodness that leads to repentance. I don't think any of you, if you were saved by somebody banging you on the head by the Bible and saying, repent, you're going to go to hell. You're going to hell wide open. Come on, repent. You may have run forward and repented to keep him from banging you on the head. But did you live a Christian life after that? No. As soon as you got out of his sight, you went back to your old ways. But when you fall in love with the goodness of God, his mercy and his love, you fall in love with how wonderful and forgiving and merciful and faithful he is. You don't want to sin. You don't want to sin. You don't want to hurt him. You love him too much. You have a wife or a husband and you dearly love them. You don't want to offend them. You don't want to hurt them. You want to cherish them. You want to care for them. I tell husbands all the time, you know, the only way to make your wife shine is polish her. Show her love. Nurture her. Care for her. Cherish her. Tell her how much you love her. Well, you don't have to live with her. Hey. Now I know why you're begrudging living with her. Start loving her, and she'll shine for you. Don't fret because of evildoers. Remit her sin. Well, now I've gone the middle, but let's go on. To give the knowledge of salvation, verse 77, unto his people by the remission of their sins, through the tender mercy of our God, whereby the day spring from on high hath visited us. Two, he's visited us. Next verse, 79. I'm reading King James translation. If you got another one, I'm sorry. Verse 79. To give light to them that sit in darkness and in the shadow of death. To guide our feet into the way of peace. Hallelujah. I've stopped counting the number of people of suicides I've interrupted. Being led by the Spirit of the Lord, being led by peace, awakened in the night, led by peace, go and knock on the door. Stop the car and talk to a person walking down the street. And saying to them, stopping in a gas station, saying to the attendant, you do not have to take your life. Jesus gave his life so you can have it and have it more abundantly. That attendant got placed in the flames, in the tears, and said, how did you know? I was just waiting for no one to be here at the station. He pulled a 38 out from under his Lord woke me up, had me there at 3:30 in the morning. Had a young man there talking to him till I got there. That young man wouldn't have been the type of person I would have chosen to talk to him. He didn't look like a Christian at all. Covered with tattoos, long hair clear down below his waist, a medallion around his neck. A medallion, yeah, a pentagram. He wouldn't be the one I would send to talk to a young man ready to commit suicide. But God knew how to use even him. As soon as I drove up and asked about a Christian radio station, the young man says, man, I'm out of here. And he took off. He detained him till I got there. A witchcraft person detained a man, despaired of his life until I could get there. Yes, God can even use people in witchcraft. If it's all he can find. He used a donkey with Balaam. Right. Balaam was in trouble. He was going to prophesy for money, wasn't he? That's worshiping the god of mammon. He was an idolater. So get understanding. The day we're living in is not a day. It is not a time for us to be foolish. It's a time for us to consider, seriously consider, what the Lord is saying to his people. Here, he says again and again in the book of Revelation, chapter 1 through 3, hear what the Spirit is saying to the churches. Hear. This is the day to hear what the Spirit is saying to the church. Hear what he's saying to you. And to line up to it and enter the discipline. Walk with the Lord. He's wonderful to walk with. Drive with the Lord. Fly with the Lord. Float with the Lord. Wherever you go. Take him everywhere you go. Go to bed with the Lord. Wake up with the Lord. Wake up with his name on your lips. Go to bed with his name on your lips. And how much you love him. Fall in love with the Lord. He's preparing you to be his bride. And the only reason God has that kind of vernacular or that kind of expression is to help you to understand his love for you. and how much your love means to him. Guys, would you marry a woman that didn't love you? Never talked to you? Never paid you any affection or attention? No! That's not the definition of marriage, is it? Well, the Father knows who the bride is. And when she makes herself ready, according to Revelation 19, verse 10, that marriage is going to happen. We're going to know as we're known. We're going to see him and we're going to like him. We'll be as he is. I can't wait for it. I have to, but I don't want to. Amen.